Like, I wouldn't wish this on any other parent, because there's nothing worse than not knowing where your child is. When you lay down at night, it's terrible.
That footage was from about 2 years ago. Can you imagine the pain and anguish that that mother is feeling today with her son still missing? 2 birthdays without him, and a lot of questions left on the table. It's time to turn on the searchlight for Devon Marsman. Welcome back to Brain Scratch Searchlight. I'm John Lordan. Thank you so much for caring about these cases like I do. That's what allows us to be able to help families in need like we do here on the channel. It was actually a cousin of Devon's that reached out and asked for this coverage, specifically to try to help the family, but really to maybe give another little beacon of hope to the woman that we saw in that introduction segment, Teresa Gray. Let's start with a quick stop at Wikipedia to learn about where this is taking place. Halifax, Nova Scotia. Halifax is the capital and largest municipality of the Canadian province of Nova Scotia. As of 2022, it's estimated that the population of the urban area is just under 350,000 people. We've got a large metropolitan type area where this young man goes missing. And of course, with that, there's a lot of surface area to cover, but there's also resources. There's been a lot of community support that has swung in on this, and I really appreciate, of course, when we have people in the area helping in that way. Over at missingkids.ca, obviously we don't have a NamUs profile for this case since this is taking place in Canada, but missingkids.ca, we have a profile for Devon Sinclair Marsman. Missing since February 21st, 2022, and I can tell you his missing date is changing from article to article. I'm just going to let you guys know about all of them. And I just want to bring this up before we get too much into the details here. We're going to learn that his missing persons report isn't taken until, I believe, the first week of March. And of course, when we have that information put out into social media, a lot of people are like, what's going on? Why didn't this parent report him? I do believe that some of these dates that are being reported are incorrect. And we did have a pattern with him leaving home for a number of days, maybe 2 or 3 days is what his mother says. So with some of the dates that we're hearing in some of the later reports that we're going to bump into, that 2 or 3 days pretty much lines up with when the missing persons report is filed. I know that's not going to be enough, that there's going to be some people out there that are critical of that. It is what it is. We want to help this family, and we need to do that by sharing the best information we can. Unfortunately, the date on this has a little bit of flux in it. His eyes are blue, they're noting here. They're also described as greenish blue in other areas. Black hair. He stands at 5 feet tall and weighs about 100 pounds. Devon Sinclair Marsman was last heard from the week of February 21st, 2022. So even there, we're starting to hear it's got some slide factor there. I bet that this field up here for missing since requires an actual date, and that's why they had to put that in there. It was reported to the Halifax Regional Police on March 4th, 2022. Family and police are concerned for his well-being. He's a 16-year-old, which is tricky about these cases because, first of all, I don't like to kind of go searching too heavily on children like this. I know he has some form of social media footprint or did before he went missing. I don't know if it's still active. I didn't lean into it too hard. But the way that this story unfolds, we're going to have to just have a little patience in terms of learning about him, learning about his family. It's coming. It's just the way this story kind of rolled out to the press was this type of release, just kind of the basics, and then a little more time went by and the family opened up a little more, and then a little more time went by, and then we started having some events trying to raise awareness to this case. So there's kind of, we're going to bump into these pockets of information where we're kind of getting a better understanding as they go. It's going to be a little out of order for what we usually do here, but let's continue at ctvnews.ca. Marsman is described as a black teenage boy who is approximately 5 feet tall and weighs 100 pounds. He has blue-green eyes and short dark hair and was last seen wearing a hoodie and jeans. that's pretty much all we're going to get in terms of the clothing description. There's no information to suggest that Devon has met with foul play. However, police and his family are concerned for his well-being, wrote Constable John McLeod with the Halifax Regional Police. One of a very small handful of comments that we're going to get from Constable McLeod. There's a statement that he likes to keep using later, which you guys have heard in these cases before. They're just not going to share a lot of details with this case. And maybe for some good reason, once we start getting in the realm of some suspicion around it. Over at cbc.ca, Halifax mom pleads for information on son's disappearance. My days are numb. I go to work because I have to go to work. I don't sleep, and I don't know if he's okay or if somebody got him, Teresa Gray said. She last saw her son the week of February 21st. She was on her way to work, and he was still asleep in his bed. Quote, so I really didn't have a chance to have a conversation with him at all, she said, about the last time that she saw him. Now, she does note here that he has disappeared in the past, but like I mentioned, specifically just for 2 or 3 days, maybe at most. In those previous instances, when she would ask him what was going on, he just said that he'd be at a friend's house. And when I asked him what friend, he'd say, it's just a friend. I'm allowed to have friends, right? But I'm like, you're allowed to call home too, she said. So in those instances, it sounds like same thing. Like there was no communication that was happening when he was away, if he was deciding to be away from his family for that period of time. So a little bit of precedence on here, and I just really want to hit that because it's I know it's a big talking point with this case about how long it takes to get to the missing persons report, but with the time frames I'm seeing, I'm not seeing anything strange around that at all. Knowing this about him. She said she still sends him text messages, but she can tell that they're not being read. She said that his phone plan is still active, but the provider told her there's been no activity. She said there's also hasn't been any activity on his social media accounts. Keep in mind, this is a 16-year-old, no driver's license. He doesn't even have an ID, basically. But he does have this cell phone, and of course, at this point, that's the lifeline that his mom's using, trying to reach out to him. She contacted his friends from around the neighborhood, but they all say that they haven't heard from him. I know the police are trying, but it doesn't seem like you get too much out of them because it's just like they're following leads, right? But I wish I knew what leads to follow too, because it's kind of hard just sitting home and not knowing anything, she said. I just want people to know that he's loved and he's missed, and I just want him to be home. Some of the similar challenges that we've seen to states, to cases down here in the States, law enforcement not always having the best touch when it comes to managing the people, managing the expectations. But with these missing persons cases, it's really tough because families don't just want to do that. They don't just want to be sitting at home waiting for someone else to go and do all the work and then bring them the answers. They feel like they have to be actively working on this in some way as well. So I totally understand her frustration with that. And it's going to become more pressing kind of as the months roll on with this case, because at some point law enforcement basically says, okay, maybe something's actually going on here, but we're not quite there yet. Over at saltwire.com. So Devon has an older brother and 3 older sisters. And Gray said that he was super close with his siblings. That's why it makes no sense. He never even left my house without telling me he loved me, so there's no way that he would be staying away if he could come home. His mom also said that he's an excellent kid who never gave her any trouble before. She described him as very calm and polite. He struggled a bit at school, she said. He got diagnosed in grade 9 with dyslexia, and he just didn't want to go to school because he didn't want to ask for the help where he struggled. But even the teachers, they never had a bad thing to say about him. When he was in school, he was always respectable. Devon was in grade 11 at Citadel High when he disappeared. His mother said he was not picked on in any way there. He was the most liked child, she said. I know for sure he was not being bullied. The footage that I've watched about some of the volunteer search efforts and some of the other community activities, we'll say, around this case, really show that this is This is a kid that was cared about. There was one picture that's kind of in my mind in particular of friends of his at a rally, and a lot of them are about his same age, and you can see the concern on their face. You can literally see the tears in their eyes. Definitely a kid that is very well liked, and of course we want to bring him home. Family and friends organize search, and this is what I was talking about. They can't just sit by. They're going to try to find him. A few dozen friends, family members, and strangers gathered in Spryfield, Nova Scotia. So now we're hearing about a little bit of a different location. 3 months of torture, said his mother, Teresa. Gray said their son was last seen with another 16-year-old and his older cousin in Spryfield. And they mean the older cousin of Devon, which is something that kind of throws this into a whole different realm in terms of thinking of situations and risk. He's hanging out with a family member and another 16-year-old. Now, admittedly, I believe that this family member is quite a bit older than them. And based on what we're going to hear through these articles and some other information that I got from the family, this is someone that has trouble with law enforcement, has charges of various kinds. Probably not the type of person you'd want your 16-year-old hanging around, but also an older cousin to Devon. CTV News decided to ask Halifax Regional Police if they knew where Marsman was, and Constable McLeod said he couldn't comment on specifics of the investigation. Quote, "What I can tell you is our investigators are doing everything they can, working with the family and reaching out to everyone they can to try and locate Devon." His mother says, "In my heart, it's almost like, is somebody holding him or is he being drugged? Because I know honestly, if he had access to a phone, I know he would call me. We're super close, and there has to be a reason why he's not in touch." And that's something that I can't kind of shake my mind from, even with the limited details that we have of this, knowing that he would disappear for a matter of days or something like that. It really makes you wonder, is there some drug use component to this? His mother would later say that she does know at a minimum that he is known to smoke weed. I don't know if he's even actually going to school at this time. I know one of the articles said he was in grade 11. I'm not sure if he was actively going to school at this time. So a lot of concern here, especially when you're thinking about someone that maybe wants to use drugs like that, maybe has found a location they can go to where that is acceptable or okay, or they're able to get it more easily there, something along those lines. And then maybe you start seeing this pattern of them disappearing for a number of days, But now we have him not coming home. The thing that's tricky and scary about that situation is we don't know what the drugs are. And there's a frequent situation that's talked about in cases of this nature where maybe there was some type of accidental overdose. The people that were with him don't want to be held responsible, and for some reason they hide him in some way. And that's certainly, I think, a concern with this case. But it's just got this kicker in it of, like, he's with a family member. Like, it's such a hard component to this to think about. So part of the reason why they're pulled out to Spryfield is this is basically where that family member was living at the time. There's also some particular search efforts that the volunteers do around a pond here. I think this is the pond right here, Roach's Pond. And they've got some good reasons for that we're going to get to. But this is basically kind of the neighborhood. You know, obviously I'm super concerned because there's water all around this. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, we have water become a factor when we do get to the answers in some of these missing persons cases. And I mean, it's everywhere, even outside of the fact that this is on a coast. If you zoom in, I mean, there's just pockets of water, there's ponds, there's rivers, there's streams, there's everything going on with water around this. So I'm going to run some of this video, but a quick freeze on this missing persons poster because there's some additional details here. He was last seen by family on February 24th and in Spryfield on February 25th. So that time frame is starting to slide about when he actually went missing. again, and I'm just trying to point these things out because I want us to have as good of an understanding in terms of when was he actually last heard from. It's a critical component in a missing persons case, but also it doubles because of how important this conversation is from what I've seen socially about why his missing persons report wasn't given until March 4th. But let's go ahead and hear some more details from his mother about what she's dealing with and all this.
I know for a fact they went to the cousin's house, which is in Spryfield. His bank account's not used. His social media platform's not used. So in my heart, it's almost like, like, is somebody holding them? But it's over well.
So law enforcement basically keys in on this location because someone figured out the piece that Devon was at this cousin's house at some point. Based on that comment from his mother, it seems like they have some form of proof that he actually went to that house, was inside that house. And now when you put the question to the people in that house, where is he? They can't get the answer. And I just want you to take a moment and put yourself in that situation. If you had a missing loved one like this, and all of a sudden the investigation hit that type of roadblock, that someone related to the missing person might have more information and isn't giving it. Outside of that, we're talking about a 16-year-old. And outside of all that, up until this point, law enforcement has said there's no reason to suspect foul play, that this is basically just a missing persons case. They're just treating it as a missing persons case. It's one of those things that makes me wonder about, like, when a condition like this comes up, like, hey, we have people that witnessed him go into this person's house, and the person's like, I don't know. I don't remember if he was there or not, or I do remember, whatever, but I don't know where he is. Shouldn't that maybe kind of, tilt the scales a little bit more into a foul play investigation? It's just something I can't shake. And I'm sure it's something that his family can't shake as well. So we get to June of 2022. A candlelight vigil is held in Halifax to mark 100 days of him missing. I appreciate community like this coming together and helping to search for Devon. And I just want to say, I'm definitely going to find Devon, said his mother, Teresa. If I have to find him myself, then I'll find him myself. And that message she holds strong. I've heard her make that quote in several different articles when I was pulling this together for you guys. There is also a podcast where she has been interviewed. It's called the Nighttime Podcast. I just want to give a quick shout out to it. If you're looking for more media after this, I highly recommend that you check it out. In particular, the second episode, it's got a lot more detail, and that's got a lot of time with her. I'll have a link to this page in the description box down below. And I just want to give a shout out to Jordan. I think Jordan does an excellent job with this interview, keeps it moving, but gets out of the way and really lets her share a bunch of good information. So hats off to Jordan's good work on that. When we get to October of 2022, all of a sudden, the messaging from the police changes. Halifax police call 16-year-old's disappearance suspicious nearly 8 months after he was reported missing. Investigators in HRP's Criminal Investigation Division said in a release, Devon's disappearance is suspicious, and there are people who have information in relation to Devon that they have not shared with police. I think we know who they're talking about, at least one person in particular. I don't know how many people are in that house. I don't know what the living situation is in that house, but there might be other people that are part of that group as well. Teresa long believed that her son's disappearance should have been further investigated. Quote, I knew basically everything was probably suspicious from the start because I'm the mother and I know that my son is not hanging out and not coming home, she said. I'm just sorry it took 7 months for them to consider that it was suspicious, but I guess it's better late than never. She says that the police have told her that Marsman took a taxi to a cousin's home in Spryfield days after she last saw him. That is something she talked about on the podcast. Apparently, someone has a voice recording of Devon actually requesting the taxi. I don't know if he sent like a voice recorded text message into the taxi service, but somehow she says she's heard it for herself. She is 100% certain that it's her son. And from the messaging that we're seeing in the media and law enforcement, it seems like everyone is pretty much on the same page that, yes, that makes sense. Apparently, this was a super cold day, very snowy, and I believe the taxi driver is that witness that saw Devon actually enter the house. At least that's based on the info that she gave in the nighttime podcast. The person in question has a criminal record, says Gray, and she believes that he's withholding information about Devon's whereabouts. Devon will turn 17 on Friday. I have my family around me, but I'm just numb, she said. Every day is just a struggle. You go to sleep and you can't sleep because every thought and every vision is Devon. Another quote from Constable McLeod here. Certainly with any investigation, it evolves as we go along and receive information. I've unhighlighted the rest of the quote because you've heard it before. At this point, our investigators do believe his disappearance is suspicious, but we think other people have information, but they're not telling us. He said he couldn't go into details about any new information that the police may have. And from this point forward, I think that's about all that we're going to hear from him in terms of details. And how does Teresa feel about this shift in perspective with law enforcement? That makes me feel like they know he's just not missing of his own accord, that something happened to him and somebody's covering it up, said Teresa. And can you imagine that she thinks that they have more information, and you can hear how at least McLeod is talking to the press publicly. He's not releasing any information. We're going to learn that even Teresa isn't getting great information from law enforcement about this investigation as well. So for her to come to that conclusion that like, hey, this really sounds like they know something else. I mean, what are they suspicious about? Where would that come from? Of course they have to know something else. Now she can add that level of frustration to everything that's going on around this as well. Speaking of which, she closes this out saying, 7 months, still no answers. People definitely need someone to give me a clue, she said. And to that point, the family begins to offer a $10,000 reward for anyone that can find Devon Marsman. Over at globalnews.ca, we get another date, and honestly, with some of the other time frames, I'm not sure that this date is accurate either, but here they're saying that she says she last saw Devon on February 27th, although it's been reported that he was last seen the week of February 21st. Based on what I'm seeing, I believe the taxi dropped him off at his cousin's house on February 25th. So I'm not sure about this date of the 27th either. I think this one seems too late. But for 3 days, Gray tried calling and texting him, but no reply. She reached out to his friends, but no one had seen him. The group of friends that I reached out to were the group of friends I always knew that he hung around with. I didn't realize Devon actually had 2 groups of friends, she said. So that's where we're starting to hear that, Devon at 16 years old might have had some things that he wasn't necessarily sharing with his mom. Here at Saltwire, a little more insight about that. Hanging with a bad crowd. Grace said that she has since found out that Devon was hanging out with some sketchy people, including a cousin that she termed really bad news. Like I mentioned before, some of these people much older than 16, up to 10 years older based on something else I saw. He's in some really, really shady things, Grace said about the cousin. So it's only 2 stories. Either Devon was set up and sent somewhere with someone, maybe that he knew and he trusted, or something happened inside that cousin's residence in Spryfield and it's being covered up. Now, I know that first part was worded kind of clunky, but I think what they're trying to allude to is some of these charges with the cousin might be related to some form of trafficking. And it might be that they're hoping that that's what's going on in this situation, because that could mean that Devon's alive and well and he's somewhere else. Maybe he's been put to work in some way, something along those lines. I don't know. But that's why there's kind of that clunky wording in the first part of that. The other is maybe something that's a bit scarier to think of, that something happened in that cousin's house and for some reason they're covering it up. She is plagued by thoughts that her son is dead. If he's out there, I just don't understand. If he's out there, why has not one person seen him? It makes no sense. I can tell you right now that he is not out there because he wants to be. Either somebody's holding Devon or something's happened to Devon. And that's another part of the trafficking aspect, is if there is some aspect of trafficking at play here, it could mean that he's been moved. He might not be in this immediate area. He might not be in that province. He might not even be in that country. So a lot of possibilities open up when we have that trafficking thing on the front. And it's something that comes up in missing person cases a lot. I don't always put a whole lot of stock into it, but based on some of the conversation that I've had with the family about this episode, the possibility of that happening in this case is in play. It's very much in play. So that's kind of why I wanted to spend a little more time on that and really drill that with you guys here. Then we got the rumor mill churning here. The rumor mill has not been encouraging. His mother receives texts from people that she doesn't know. She forwards those on to the police investigators. Those texts have included people saying that he was shot inside the Spryfield residence where the taxi dropped him off. Another said that he was buried in Macintosh Run. Quote, "We've had Macintosh Run searched with dogs. He's not there," said his mother. Another person wrote that they heard he overdosed and was thrown in a lake. Grace said that since it was February when he went missing, she doesn't think that's likely because there wasn't a lake that wasn't frozen at the time. The cousin apparently has changed his story 4 times. There's no concern whatsoever for Devon, she said. I think it's because they actually know what the story is, and yeah, I think they know exactly what's taken place. So her suspicions pretty firmly targeted on that cousin, and maybe law enforcement's as well. Disappearance of Halifax teen Devon Marsman added to Nova Scotia's Unsolved Crime Rewards Program. I'm not super familiar with this program, but the reward that they're putting behind this case, substantial. And if it is a case where you've got a bunch of people in a house and one of those people might have the information, this might be the amount of money to get them to act on it. Hasn't happened yet. This was as of the end of 2022 that this reward was announced. I believe it's still in play. There's a couple of conditions in terms of it that might make it a little tricky. Basically, if you call in specifically to try to get this reward, you can't quite do that anonymously. So it's not like a Crime Stoppers reward. This is being treated a little bit differently. Basically, they think that if they do have someone come forward with that level of information, they're going to need them for a trial. They're going to have to be a witness on the stand. But $150,000 Canadian being offered for that. The Provincial Justice Department is offering up to $150,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction of those responsible for the disappearance of Devon Sinclair Marsman. So very, very substantial reward. But like I said, it's a little bit of a tricky reward because you do have to identify yourself. You can't do it anonymously. Here we see a protest, the first of a few that would be held in this case. I've got to say, there's some people working with the family in terms of advocacy, and they're doing a very good job of kind of hitting the right times. You know, the anniversary of his disappearance and his birthday, there pretty much seems to be an event every year since. So some pretty good work happening on that front and people staying committed to it as well. January 2023, a group of protesters gathered in Halifax to bring attention to the disappearance of Devon Marsman almost a year after he was reported missing. In a poster promoting the event, organizers described the protest as a peaceful stand against the mishandling and lack of support regarding Devon's missing persons case. So a strong message in terms of what they're trying to raise awareness to, but pretty fair message. I mean, keep in mind that law enforcement starts looking into this as a missing persons case. It's not too long after that they had to figure out these components of where he was last seen, when he was last seen, who he was seen by, the information from the taxi driver. Like, they didn't just all of a sudden bump into all that information 7 months later and we're like, oh, okay, now we think it's suspicious. I mean, there's pieces of that they learned along the way. And one of those pieces could have been enough for them to kind of flip the gears on this before. But even with them saying that it's suspicious, I think this is also pointing out that the family's just not hearing about a lot of activity that's going on with this level of an investigation. So leading up to this protest, we know that the focus is really zeroing in on the cousin, at least from the family's perspective. I can tell you that in some of that time period, based on some info we're going to get to still, The family is not aware of police actually looking at that house, doing any type of investigation into that home. So this type of frustration and pulling together an event like this where you're trying to raise exposure and basically put out this message of, hey, this case isn't being handled great. Speaking of which, there's also some other things with investigators that his mother has run into. Kind of makes sense to me. Thankfully, we will learn that some level of investigation has happened at that house. But let's continue with the next article, which is actually from the anniversary day, a year after her son's disappearance, February 24th, 2023. It should have been criminal, deemed suspicious right away, said Devon's mother. She says that her daughter saw Devon at home on February 24th, 2022. But the police have told her they have proof that he ordered a taxi to his cousin's house in Spryfield the next day. So I think this time frame is the one that we can lean into pretty strongly. And if I recall correctly from the nighttime podcast, I think this is the same time frame that she's basically quoting there. So this seems to be the one that's sticking. Gray says that police did collect some evidence while searching a residence in the Spryfield area. I was told not long ago. They can't specifically tell me what came back, but whatever came back now is being called hold evidence. So they're not being very clear with her about what they found at the house. And it sounds like she's saying that they searched the house not long ago. So I don't know that it was searched at the time. And I think that's also part of the frustration here. Because once it became suspicious, maybe that's when all of a sudden they said, hey, let's go ahead and let's search the house. But I can't say that for certain either, because law enforcement's communication with the press on this case is practically nothing. With the family on this case, strained and minimal is at least what it seems like based on what the mother is saying publicly. Gray says police and search and rescue scoured a pond in Spryfield last fall, though police would not confirm this. So it's interesting because I believe the article I read said that they were actually doing a volunteer search there. I think they chose to do that volunteer search because the police had been out there searching Roach's Pond. What is it about this pond? We don't know. But if that information got back to the mother, hey, for some reason, police are out here searching this pond, I'm sure she's going to wonder about it. And it's going to add to that pressure I kind of mentioned before about what do they know that they're not telling me. I'm not sure what that search entailed or why they specifically went to Roach's Pond, she said. There are people still that haven't provided information to us, and that information could be important, said Constable McLeod. Same message, no change, no new details from law enforcement. And that's something that I wish at some point law enforcement would kind of come to understand as well, especially with how these news cycles kind of work and trying to raise exposure in these cases. You know, at year 2 or something, it doesn't have to be some super critical piece of information, certainly nothing that would risk or jeopardize the investigation, but even just a new quote, like even just some kind of decent insight, you know, hey, we've put this number of hours towards this, we've interviewed this many people. I mean, those kind of things, that's what the press is looking for to help with these news cycles. And if this is a case, and I really believe this from the messaging we're seeing, if this is a case where they're waiting for someone to literally call in the tip that's going to give them this case, then embrace that news cycle, embrace that type of communication, because that's what's going to lead to that tip. Obviously, the $150,000 has been sitting out there for over a year. It didn't work. So there's got to be some other component to hit with that. Devon's mother doing all the press that she can, being very open, being vulnerable in the press that she's doing. She is doing everything she can. That I really believe if that person that has the information is watching and seeing the pain that that woman's in, maybe that's going to turn some gears in their head and start getting them to do the right thing. Just some level of involvement from law enforcement. If you are waiting for this tip to come in, like, just engage. So the rallies do continue. October 2023 would be Devon's 18th birthday. Dozens rallied to raise awareness about Marsman on the date of his 18th birthday. They walked through a West Halifax neighborhood on Saturday night chanting, "Bring Devon home." And look at the turnout for this. I mean, it honestly looks like these events are getting bigger and bigger as time's going on. Once again, a credit to not only this woman that is sharing herself so openly about her son's case, but the people that are working with her. Teresa Gray dreads going to bed because that's when her mind runs wild. She pores over the possibilities of how her diminutive teenage boy might have met his end. Was he shot? Was his small body set on fire? Was he thrown into the woods or the ocean? I'm 100% consumed, just trying to figure out where else to search. I'm probably never going to find out exactly what happened to him. It's bad. It's so bad. What if the police treated her son's disappearance as a criminal case from the beginning? Well, let's get into a little more of some of the challenges that she had around that. Investigators told her that the boy had taken a cab to Gala Court in Spryfield. He was with two other men, one of whom was his cousin. Both men had extensive criminal records involving violence and drug trafficking. Devon had left behind a computer, iPod, PlayStation 4. He used those devices regularly. His computer contained a contact list with coded names and phone numbers. The police never examined those devices. Now that's troubling because it sounds like maybe he was being brought into some level of business that he shouldn't have been. I mean, this is starting to sound like some form of dealing or some type of drug involvement for sure. The police never examined those devices. His social media accounts had not been accessed by investigators in the weeks after his disappearance. Like, even if it's not a criminal investigation or not even suspicious, shouldn't that be just a step in a missing persons investigation? She ran into serious problems with the two lead investigators. Both would text her pictures of missing children, none of them resembling her boy. Yeah, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. One of the investigators would dive into one particularly heated conversation about the case that was happening on Facebook. The topic had to do with Marsman's last known whereabouts at the home on Gala Court. Now, this kind of gets back to what I was mentioning before. Marsman's mom believed that the home had not been searched. The investigator, this one, Investigator Carvery, responded saying, once again, people commenting with no context, the house at Gala was searched. So the house was searched. I think there's still a little bit of a question in terms of when. And it's interesting to me that that information is kind of coming out in that format. You've got the investigators actually working on the case that are dropping comments like that in a public forum. And I'm saying, guys, like I wish that they would release more details about this to help the news cycle a bit. But even outside of that, you're releasing information that the family didn't seem to know. Another person suggested that information should have been shared with the public, to which Carvery replied, "It's not supposed to be posted. The family knew, and the public doesn't need to know everything that's being done. People like to make assumptions too much, hence the comments." It seems like the mother did not know about it, at least also based on her own information on the Nighttime podcast. Grace said that she was shocked that Carvery, a person investigating her son's case, was on social media talking about it. She would file a complaint against the officer with the department. She'd do the same against the other lead investigator. That situation, basically just a hard conversation that happened between the two. Once again, that would make you wonder if they realize that they're talking to someone that's hurt. It's something that I learned once I got into this space very, very quickly, especially when you're dealing with family members. Like, you're dealing with people that are hurt. They're not going to be always the most cordial, kind, nicest version of themselves. You're going to be dealing with someone that is in pain. So does it make sense that you would get angry at them and call them up and, yell at them for trying to talk to another detective in the case or something like that? It's just, I don't know. So they were removed as lead investigators on the case, but they did remain on the case, just not in the lead investigator role. Let's see. In the weeks after her son went missing, Devon's mom would find out that her boy lived a secret life. He eventually stopped going to school. I don't know if she knew it at the time, and that might be why the earlier news reports are talking about him being in grade 11 at that time. Unbeknownst to his mom, he had started hanging out with his cousin. But she said she saw no signs that her son was up to anything illegal except smoking pot, which it's in Canada, and Canada has been kind of famously decriminalized with marijuana for decades, I think, at this point. She said that her son never had much money on him other than what she had given him. He didn't buy any new things. She says that he wore a chain that actually belonged to her. They were close, she said. He'd call me at work 40 or 50 times some days. He'd ask me to email transfer him $20 or bring fries home. I never said no. Family and friends hold march 2 years after Devon Marsman's disappearance. So this happening just a few weeks ago at this point. And once again, a good amount of people showing up and trying to raise awareness to this case. Including this woman in the front who is, I believe, one of the organizers that I just want to share her name with you. She is Lisa Fenton. She's part of the Devon Sinclair Marsman Missing group. I'll have links to these. There's actually 2 Facebook groups that I found, so I'll have links to both of them down below. But Lisa, if you happen to see this, just thank you so much for helping in this case, boots on ground, in the way that you are. I really appreciate that there's people to stand by these families and help them like this. And in these latest articles from a few weeks ago, unfortunately, no new details, but a really good point from his mom. I don't understand. If they know where Devon was and they know who he was with, it shouldn't be 2 years. And I do think that that's pretty tricky, pretty tough to understand that from my perspective as well. There is a Web Sleuths forum on this. It's only 1 page at this long. There was some type of other podcast available on this over at the Canadian Broadcasting Company. It's been pulled down, but thankfully Yaya521 grabbed some of the important points from it. And I just wanted to help firm up the information a little bit. So the taxi supposedly dropped Devon off at that cousin's house at 7 p.m. on the 25th of February, 2022. The cousin's stories and how those have been changing, we have kind of abbreviated versions here. The first was that he wasn't with Devon at all. Then he didn't see him. So maybe Devon was at the house, but he didn't see him. Then, yeah, he was at the house. Then apparently the cousin was sleeping. He wakes up. Maybe Devon saw him. So there's all these different variations that are coming from the cousin. But there's people that say that they had seen him with his cousin that day. So it sounds like we've got some other potential witnesses in this as well. Cousin is bad news, has a very long, extensive criminal record. And the possibility that his cousin sent him with somebody, she doesn't think that Devon is still in the area. And like I said, based on some of the stuff that I saw from the other family member, it seems like that's a possibility in this case. I don't know why they would have sent Devon off with someone. Maybe if he was getting wrapped up in some type of drug activity or something like that, maybe it was to have him go perform some duty, move something. I don't know. Like, what are you going to use a 16-year-old for in those situations? I don't even want to send my mind down that, because there's a lot of different things that people in that space might do. As I mentioned, nighttime podcast, link down below. I think the perfect follow-up to this episode here today is to listen to part 2 of this. Just jump right in, hear directly from Devon's mother, all those additional details directly from her. And as I mentioned, both Facebook groups that I found will be in the description box down below. And there is a post from his mother, Teresa, on Facebook, basically calling out the police. HRP, do better. Pretty simple. There is a change.org petition. It's got a very simple goal. Basically, it's just trying to get numbers together to show that police department, to basically send the message, do something, get on this case, help this family. What do you guys need to get this thing to move forward? I think this community would be there to help provide it. Waiting for someone to kind of give you the tip that you're looking for. Is there any other methods that can be used with this case? I think it's really just to show your support for kind of pressing that question with them. Please consider signing the change.org petition. There is also a GoFundMe page that is running on this case. Looks like it hasn't had a donation in a while. Well, I think we should fix that. On behalf of myself and my supporters, thank you guys so much. We're going to make a donation to this GoFundMe just as soon as I'm done filming here today. I can only do that because of wonderful supporters like new patrons Jordan Farr and DB. Thank you guys so much. If you want to become part of that group that helps us make donations like this together, please visit LordanArts.com. You can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee. All of it helps the channel keep going, helps us keep helping these families and doing things like donating to this cause, which basically is going to help maybe buy some new flyers, maybe help his mother with more gas money. She's working very, very hard, and we just want to really show her the support. So I appreciate you guys so much. Please take a moment, think of, do I have any friends, acquaintances in Canada? And share this video with them. And quite honestly, there's a chance he could be in the US as well. So if you've got a friend of yours that you think their heart would be open to this case, please shoot them a link to this video and share it with them. To the family member that reached out to me, thank you so much for trusting me to share this information about Devon's case. And Teresa, keep it going. I know you keep saying it. If you need to be the one to find him, you're going to be the one to find him. But just keep looking for that help. Keep that circle of really supportive people around you and keep that hope alive. Thank you all, and please have a great weekend. We'll see you again here next week on the LordanArts channel.